So good morning to those who've joined. If you're looking for a webinar on culture, you've come to the right place. We have just over 60 people registered so far. We'll wait because we had over 200 registered. So we'll start very shortly once folk have joined. Thank you. Well, good morning and welcome to this webinar on culture. I'm Russell Borland, and with my business partner, Thomas Chalmers, we're delighted to have you here with us for this session. The webinar will finish at 9:30, and there will be chance for you to ask questions of the panelists via the chat function and Q&A function as shown on your screen. And there will be a poll or two during the session for you to interact with. Now, the webinar is part of a programme that we are working with the Scottish Board on called Learn to Leap. And that is a programme for Scottish-based actuaries covering the Learn framework shown on this slide, where we're looking at leadership, engagement, awareness, resilience, and network. And the purpose of the programme is to help actuaries leverage their extensive technical skills by looking at issues, key issues such as leadership and relationship skills. And the programme, for those who are attending, are shown here. It's primarily workshops of about 20 to 30 people to get engagement. And you can see how the topics are panning out over the 6-month period. Now, part of the programme is 2 webinars, and this is the first of the 2 webinars on culture. And the Scottish Board felt that it would be useful and helpful to the profession if the 2 webinars were broadcast beyond Scotland and to the broader actuarial community. And so this is the first of 2. The second one is in March, and we'll be advertising that in the same way. So hopefully see many of you at the second one as well. Now, we have a fantastic panel to discuss culture, which is so important in life, in business world, organisations. And we have a fantastic panel with us this morning to discuss that. We have Liz Bingham, who was formerly a senior partner within EY and received an OBE for work in promoting equality and diversity in the workplace. And Liz now has a portfolio including an interim CEO role. So welcome, Liz. We then have Suee, who all of you will know as the current president of the IFoA, and who also has a portfolio. He's a non-executive director, but many years in the industry. And he was just saying he used to work across the road from Staple Inn at the Prudential Building near Holborn. And finally, we have Richard Foley, who is senior partner of the award-winning legal firm Pinsent Masons. And I know that culture is integral to the way they operate their business. So welcome everybody, welcome all the actuaries in the Learn to Leap programme, but also to everybody else who's joined from outside Scotland, welcome. And I'll pass over to Thomas to start the conversation.
Well, thank you, Russell, and a very good morning, everyone. When we talk about culture in a professional or an organisational context, one of the problems that we often encounter is actually there are so many different definitions and meanings of the word. So Liz, Richard, Suee, welcome again to this session this morning. Liz, if I may start with yourself, how would you define or describe this word culture?
Oh, thanks, Thomas. Good morning, everybody. I think fundamentally for me, it's about not what you do in business, but it's about how you go about doing what you do. And that how you go about it affects not only your staff and your senior colleagues, but it also affects in the professional services world, which I share with you all. It also affects your clients. So your clients need to understand what it is about your culture that enables you to be effective in delivering to help them solve the problems that they're facing.
Great, Liz, thanks. And you make a great point there. It's about how you do things. And I will come back to that, Liz, because you have done things very well over the course of your career. So I'm going to hold that thought. And Richard, how would you describe this or define this word culture?
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. I mean, look, I work in a law firm, and we do love a definition. So if any organisation is going to torture itself around these sorts of things, believe you me, we have done that. Actually, I would encourage people not to worry too much about how other people define it. You just need to work it out for yourself. I don't mean as in ignore what other people are doing, but I don't think it is one of those things where there is a right definition and a wrong definition. I think the critical component here is, work out what you mean by your culture. I would encourage you then to try to write it down and codify it. And that's not easy, but I think, having the conversations from within your business. So don't set it at the board level. Don't say, right, the board has decided our culture is. Go into your business and find out what you feel your culture is. I mean, the way we did it within Pinsent Masons was we sought to identify what were the ingredients of us on our best day. What qualities does your organisation exhibit when you're showing up absolutely at your own best, and that gives you a clue as to what the core ingredients of your culture is. Then the difficult bit is you judge yourself by reference to that culture on your worst day, because everybody's a nice guy when things are going well. That's the easy bit. The true test of your culture is actually when you're having a bad day, when the team's under pressure, it's all gone wrong. People are tired. Are you then able to exhibit the characteristics that define you on your best day? And that's been quite a useful technique that we've used. Oh,
that's great, Richard. Thank you. And I've seen you close at hand on a best day, so we'll come back to that in a moment. Thank you. Chieh, how would you describe this? I mean, you've really inspired this webinar this morning with your own focus and culture. How do you define or describe it?
I first heard about the word culture as a young man, actually more than 30 years ago, when I was sent to, I believe, Cranfield School of Management in Milton Keynes by Prudential at that time, because I was a young manager who needs to learn about managerial skills. And the program was called Young Managers Program. And it was a 10-word definition by two lecturers, Gil McWilliam and Joe Jupp. And I have never thought about any other definition. And it's a 10-word definition. And they told us, the class, culture is the way things are done when no one is watching.
Oh, nice.
And I thought, okay, I could live with that. And we could talk about various attributes and all that and content of culture, but I would leave that to later. So that have always stuck with me. And this morning I look at Wikipedia, they use slightly different words and definitions, but essentially that's what it is.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Suee. And yeah, we'll come back to that point that you're making. But if I could stick with you, Suee, because obviously our attendees this morning are largely from the actuarial community. And back in the 18th of June, in your presidential address, your inaugural address, you said, and I quote, "And let me tell you, culture matters deeply. In fact, in a world of transformational change, culture is the only thing that really matters. Our reinvention is really about the cultural transformation of the profession." So these days we hear about culture very much in an organisational context, but your focus has been really to transform, if you like, the culture of the actuarial profession, if you will. Can you speak more about your vision in a few words for the profession?
I'll do that because there are many interconnected parts. One is about the vision, which requires a change in mindsets. And mindsets essentially are about patterns and preferences which constitute culture. But first about the vision first. Our vision is about relevance, influence, and impact, because we want our work and our profession to be relevant, influential, and impactful. And who would argue with that? So if you like, there are two parts to it. We want to be influential and relevant in our workplace. So we want to be able to thrive in a world of change. And that world of change is personified by the digital revolution, as well as the fourth industrial revolution. And when this strategy was conceived with our colleagues in 2018 and 2019, we were concerned that our actuarial toolkit was based on the old world. Data science was coming in, and we needed to modernize our syllabus into data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. And we have all agreed to that. But we realized that it's not just about skills. It's also about our mindsets, which enables us to thrive. It's about curiosity, it's about adaptability, it's about continuous learning. Those are more important than the skills we can impart on our generation, new generation of actuaries. So when I qualified 30, 40 years ago, I was given a safe and secure box, and my career was protected because change was not occurring that often. But today, we cannot say that to our young actuaries, especially their lives are longer, their lives are going longer, and technology is changing faster. So we want to give them a new mindset so that they can convert a safe and secure box into a springboard for the future, so they can thrive in a digital age. And that is the do well part of our vision. In other words, we want ourselves to thrive. But there is a do good part, which came with powerful force in the last 10 months when COVID-19 came in. And we realized that the world we live in is less sustainable than we think. We already had the bushfires and the planetary crisis, but with pandemic, all our fault lines were unmasked. And we realized that we are living in a world where our actuarial models may not be able to explain all the risks inherent in the place we work in, because new uncertainties are in place. And also we were reminded very often in our discussion that we have a public interest role as actuaries. And so what is our public interest role? We call ourselves actuaries, and we call ourselves risk professionals. And risk professionals use toolkits and models about the system. But if the system is not functioning, we have an obligation to inform, to challenge, and to debate. That is our public interest role in sustainability, and that relates to climate risk, pandemic risk, the efficacy of our financial systems, and so forth. So we need to be able to think systematically, and that is what we call the do good part of our vision. If the earlier part I talk about curiosity, adaptability, and a growth mindset, in this later part, we should talk about courage, imagination, and the use of judgment. And these qualities, courage was called for by our first actuary from Scotland, who's the president, first president of the IFoA, Ronnie Bowie. Imagination was called for by Reddington. And judgment comes as a pair to uncertainty, which is the world we live in. And those were our roots. Yeah. So if you like, the vision is about doing well for our roles in our workplace, doing good in our public interest role in a society we live in. Yeah. So that is essentially a vision. And you see that I make great plays about values, which we could talk about, because values is about the way things are done, and attitude and mindset we adopt. And that is essentially the culture of the place sort of culture of the profession.
Thank you, Suee. I wonder, this might be an opportune moment. We've got a critical mass. So I see about over 150 attendees here. Russell, I wonder if we could run the first poll here, just to find out to what extent our audience feel that the actuarial profession needs to change to stay relevant and influential. Russell, if I could pass to yourself.
Yes, thanks, Thomas. The poll's just launched and we have a significant number already, but 80 folk already answered.
Mm-hmm.
And the results are clearly indicating, I will share once we've finished voting, but they are clearly indicating a significant number of people feel that the profession still needs to change to stay relevant and influential. I'll just end the polling now and share the results.
Oh yeah, thank you, Russell. Yeah, I can see the numbers there, and of course, Suee, a few weeks ago when we had a pre-meeting, you did predict that, you know, more than 75% of attendees would probably vote as they have this morning. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Russell. If I could move on for a moment, then coming back to yourself, Liz, as Russell was saying earlier, you received your OBE in the 2015 New Year's Honours list. You've been a leading campaigner for diversity in the workplace. You've been a Stonewall role model. You know, we've known each other now for a number of years, Liz, and Russell and I have always sort of looked upon you as the sort of David Beckham of Manchester United, where your star rose above the EY Stadium. Now, how did you do that? How did you influence EY and the culture there?
Well, gosh, that's I could take up the rest of our time together this morning talking about this, but let me try and boil it down to a few key areas. So firstly, I think from a personal perspective, I grew up with my father working for Heinz, and we used to move schools once every 2 years, my brother and I, because my dad was moving around so much with his job. And as I got older into my teenage years, those moves became increasingly difficult because you were moving into environments that were very exclusive to themselves and didn't encourage inclusion of other. And that was a very difficult period for me until I moved to a school in Paris, and it was the English school in Paris, and by definition, everybody in that school had sort of moved at least once in their lives, so they knew what it was like, and it was the most inclusive environment that I had experienced. So from a personal perspective, I knew that my individual performance suffered when I was excluded, and absolutely went off the scale when I was included and felt part of an organization, in that case being my school. So that was, you know, some of my personal backdrop. I was taught very early on by my boss at the time about the value of authentic leadership, and being able to deliver of your best either to your clients or to your teams through being authentic, open, and to be culturally savvy, if you will, in terms of, you know, the behaviors that I expected of myself, and also the behaviors that I expected of those around me. And then, so having informed that notion of inclusive leadership, authentic leadership, my career really accelerated. So there was evident value in all of these ideas. So when I was able to find my voice, you know, by dint of sort of seniority and role within the organization, This was very much about building on my personal experiences, personal and professional experiences, to demonstrate the value across the organization of behaving in an inclusive way, which is a lot about respect and is a lot about innovation that Suee has talked about. It's a lot about, creating an environment where people feel that it is safe for them to make a contribution and to put ideas into the room. And that isn't to say, so this was all about business performance, because that was what drives most of us in business, unless you're a registered charity, and EY is not a registered charity. So getting individual performance to its maximum enabled the business performance to achieve its maximum. And that was quite a compelling story for the partners that I was working with. But in spite of that, there were still some folk that were a little behind the curve, if I could put it politely. And so the way of working with them was actually to really drill down into what their individual pain points might be. And that might have been around, that they were really finding it difficult to recruit in their area of the business, or they were finding it difficult to retain their very best staff. Because as I think we've all said, when we talk about culture, it pervades everything that we do and every aspect of our organization. So finding those pain points and then using the development of the idea around inclusion and authenticity and so on, inclusive leadership, to solve for those problems, it became a really compelling narrative within the firm.
Great, Liz. And Liz, if you could talk personally for a moment, you've always struck me as a very sort of confident person. And do you think that inclusiveness that you experienced at a young age has sort of underpinned that, or is that just something that you've developed over the years?
I think it definitely underpinned that. But I think more critically than that was the boss that I mentioned. And in the lesson that he taught me about authenticity and effective leadership was when I came out to him. I'm LGBT. And he really actively encouraged me to be open about my sexual orientation in the workplace, although I was quite reluctant at the time to do that. And what I discovered in being open and being able to be authentic was it took away and it neutralized the negative influences around me, because there was nothing that wasn't exposed and visible. So that in turn gave me a huge amount of confidence.
Great, Liz. Thanks for sharing those insights. Richard, coming back to yourself, I know that, a few years ago, Russell and I think were running a few workshops for the Law Society of Scotland, and we started to do some research on high-performing teams. And the more we Googled high-performing teams, the more Pinsent Masons came up in the Google results. Now, it's an international, purpose-led professional services business with law at its core. We know that it's a multi-award-winning business. You and I have discussed those three values: approachable, bold, connected, that underpin the Pinsent Masons culture. I know that you talked earlier about codifying the culture. Can you speak more to this, to the importance, if you like, of purpose and values, and how those have really underpinned the growth and the culture of Pinsent Masons?
Yeah, absolutely. And Thomas, I have to say, you're the best PR man we have ever had at Pinsent Masons. You're doing an absolutely outstanding job. So please don't stop. Happy to do that. Just pointing that, could I just make an observation in relation to the poll that you just ran?
Yes,
because
thank you.
Change programs are always hard. I mean, I'm sure we all know that. But the principal reason they're hard is that most of the people don't believe change is necessary. So the fact you've got 75% or more of the people watching today who are buying into the concept of change, I would say is a really powerful thing for the actuarial profession. People don't have to take an individual's word for it. Yes. Take some data like that. It's a really powerful piece of information put together there.
That's a great point, Richard. Thanks ever so much, and I can see Chieh noting that down there. So thank you for making that.
No, not at all. So I think going back to the values question and the work we've done in relation to purpose, I guess a couple of things that I observe. The first thing, keep it simple, and it comes back a little bit to the definition stuff. The fact our values within our business are approachable, bold, connected, as easy as ABC is not coincidental. Because your values are only as powerful as the ability of people to understand them and kind of recognize them. Again, don't overly define them. Just you don't need to tell people what it means to be truly approachable. They will work that out for themselves. You don't need a paragraph describing what approachable is. You don't need a paragraph describing, in our case, what bold is or connected is. So that would be my first thing. I would suggest, keep it simple and memorable. If I go back a few years ago, we had ambition and excellence and this and that and goodness knows what else on the other, and nobody could really remember it really. So it wasn't a unifying force. Second thing I think is to recognize there's a world of difference between a business that has a set of values and a values-led business. Those are chalk and cheese. There are tons of businesses out there that have values and they have posters and they're on the wall, and once a year they have a cake day or a jeans day and they celebrate their own values. And okay, that's better than not having them. I get that, but that is fundamentally different to a values-driven business, because a values-driven business, I would suggest, is one that doesn't allow its values to exist in some kind of parallel universe to its strategy. If you have a business strategy and alongside that you have a set of values, whenever the pressure is on, your business strategy will win, and your values will get sacrificed on the altar of performance or financial performance. So one of the things that we tried to do, and I'd commend this to those watching, is that we set about a number of years ago talking about values as strategic imperatives. We have a strategic vision to become a truly purpose-led professional services business with law at its core, and we have no prospect of delivering that strategic vision unless we are approachable, bold, and connected all the time. Not just on our best days when we feel like it, but all the time. And I never make a strategic presentation to the business without talking about our values as strategic imperatives. So just trying to bring it from the outside, kind of over here, into the strategic heart of your own business. Because then, going back to what Chieh was saying, is that in terms of kind of relevance to your clients, you're talking about your values, and your values are your code of conduct. They're how you promise to behave. And when you bring them into the strategic heart of your business, what you're demonstrating to your customers, your suppliers, and your people, is that you believe these things are directly relevant to how you deliver the service that you deliver. And that, I think, is the essence of the difference between a business with a set of values, or a business with a purpose, and a purpose-led business or a values-driven business. And then the final thing is that you've got to be prepared to do the hard yards, basically to realign everything within your business around your values or your own purpose. So that's your remuneration structures, your promotion structures, and so on and so forth. Because again, if you don't do that, what you're signaling is that stuff lives in the business bit of your business and has nothing to do with the values bit. And that, I don't believe, is sustainable.
Richard, thanks. And when you were talking there, it reminded me of what Suee said earlier about culture is what you're doing when no one else is really looking, or when you don't think anyone's looking. And I'm going to come back to this point with yourself, but I did come to your office to meet you. I think it was over a year ago. I was in the vestibule or the waiting area, and I do vividly remember you came out of the lift to meet me. You didn't initially see me, and you stopped to have a conversation with the cleaner on the floor. And it wasn't just that did you have a good weekend passing comment. I mean, I could see that you were in deep conversation with her. Then when we went into the meeting room, I said, I don't want to keep you, your time's precious, at which point you said, why should my time be any more precious than yours? These things really struck me, and I guess it's why we reached out to you, because we thought that you, in your own person, had influenced the entire culture of Pinsent Masons. It was, I think, Mahatma Gandhi who said, you need to be the change that you want to see in the world. And as far as Russell and I can see, Suee, Chieh, Liz, Richard, you are all, you know, real role models in this space. Suee, Chieh, if I could come back to yourself, in your presidential address, you talked about the DNA of the actuary. How do you suggest that the profession strikes that delicate balance, if you like, between drawing on the DNA of the actuarial profession whilst being a role model for cultural change?
Again, there are two interconnected parts, yeah, because the DNA story is a narrative which we mine from the literature we have in our library and in our history about who, and also in conversations with actuaries in Scotland, UK, India, Africa, and Southeast Asia. Most of us, in fact, I would say 99% of us come from a background where we had an inclination, a strong inclination to mathematics and analytical ability. And many of us also want to do it in a practical setting and in an organizational setting. So we are not into theoretical physics and all that, or in engineering, there are different fields. And we have also been warned by our senior actuaries like Chris Dakin that we shouldn't wander too far away from our core. Otherwise, we become seduced by the siren of generalism and it lost our proposition. So our DNA is people who are fond of mathematics in our school and want to make a career, a fulfilling career in a practical setting, an organizational setting. Never would a 17-year-old boy or girl want to be working in pensions or in insurance or annuities. Yeah, they want to apply their mathematics. So that is our DNA. Yeah, how our skills are used by society depends on the whole evolution of interactions with industry. But that's our DNA is. Our argument for the BSMD is that given our DNA, we can go into investments, which we are. We can go into general insurance, which we are. We can go into data science. We can go into consulting, climate science, because they use a mathematical capability. Then you ask a very important question about role model for change, right? Because that is about diversity. And again, we look into our history. Reddington is one of our past president, and many would not disagree with me if I say he's one of our greatest actuaries. And he said that actuaries do not have any vices, but we may be weighed down by 4 quintessential values, yeah, besetting virtues, which are reticence, cautiousness, consistency, and accuracy. And some of you who are psychologists would recognize those words, right? And you will say that many of us, not all of us, have this. And he said that those are virtues, but we must leave room for other values like imagination and impulse. But when he used the word impulse, he meant believing in your gut instinct, yeah. And of course, there are other values like courage and curiosity which came in. So it's about diversity of values, yeah. So the cultural change is about hooking to your DNA, but introducing a diversity of values. And diversity is necessary, especially if you want to be sustainable, right? So I was talking the other day, you know, actuaries will really understand this, right? We want a resilient profession. A resilient profession, like a resilient stock portfolio, has to be a diversified portfolio. You could have great banking stocks, but it'd be foolish to have all our stocks in banking, right? You have some fintech stocks, some retail stock, some transport stock, right? So that is what the new profession is about. And it is not as far-fetched as you think, because it's a different flavor of actuary, right? Which makes us more sustainable. If you meet commercial actuaries, say in GI actuary, they will have a slightly different field. If you meet, say, actuaries from South Africa, they have a different field. You meet senior management actuaries, they have a slightly different field. And I think maybe for the last 10, 20 years, we may have been slightly more inward looking, partly due to industry practices, the Morris Review, the difficulties in equitable life. But I think that period is over. We should look outwards now to introduce a greater diversity of values and mindsets. And that feels so correct in the times we're living today, right? Because a diversity of thinking is really necessary to address the issues we are facing.
Thank you, Suee. And Russell, I think we do have a few questions. I know that we do have a question that came in before the event actually that may be relevant here, but I'll pass over to yourself.
Yes, Thomas, we had a question in advance from Peter Galvin, and it was very much along the lines that we've been talking about. And he was basically asking, should we go outside the profession, example, ex-Google employees, and ask them how to implement a cultural transformation program, because the profession has found it so hard to date to transform maybe as radically as you may have wanted. So I thought that was a very pertinent question given the conversation at the moment.
Thanks, Russell. Chieh, do you want to comment on that? Do you think that the profession needs to go to a Google, for example?
No, I don't think so. I have the highest respect for many consultants who are experiencing this matter. I did say in my presidential address that the strategy, actually, the SMD strategy is a reflection of many things we wanted to do for the last 25 years in different words. But we need to make sure that the institution, IFoA, undergoes a cultural transformation. Yeah. And we also need to alter some of our governance arrangements because the governance arrangements and the IFoA internal cultural values are children of our own culture, the profession's culture as the mother council. Yeah. So we need to so we have a systems problem. So we need to be more self-aware. And I would say that we are making promising headway in addressing this. Yeah. And I do not think it is a question of asking a great consulting company like McKinsey or Bain coming in and to give us conversations on that. I think a lot of it is steadfastness, purpose, a sense of mission, and I somehow feel, especially in the last few weeks, that that we could be going through it, yeah, and we have been going through it, and this is based on sound thinking, but more importantly, in terms of people's commitment to it. Yeah.
Thanks, Suee. And Liz, if I could, sorry, Richard, you want to make a point?
Yeah, would you mind if I just sort of come in there? I mean,
sure.
Yeah, not for me to disagree with your own president, of course, and I don't think I am, and I think it's absolutely right. You know, it isn't the solution to delegate this to an external professional. You know, it's almost to abdicate responsibility for something that actually is yours to solve. That said, I'm sure we'd all agree, reaching out and getting experiential diversity from others. You know, people of the same sorts of profession can sometimes look through a similar lens, and just reaching out to others and just getting a sense of, you know, has it worked? Has it worked in one of the big four? Has it worked in a law firm? Or has it worked in a military environment? You know, so I'd encourage people not to be frightened of going out and seeking experience from others. But I would agree, I would caution against delegating the problem to a consultant, because they'll give you an answer, but it won't help you because you're the only ones that can actually implement it.
Sure.
And I think if I could just build on what Richard has said, I completely agree that this shouldn't be delegated, and there is a temptation to delegate it because it is hard. And my fear in the question is that there's almost an implied delegation if we start talking about culture change for the profession. It's got to be culture change at an organization and an individual level rather than the professional level. You can't delegate it to Suee or the institute, in the same way as you can't delegate it to a bunch of consultants to help you. You've got to own it, and you've got to own it at grassroots level in your organization.
Yes, Suee, thank you.
No, actually, I need to correct. Maybe actually we are speaking to outside bodies and people who are skilled in facilitation and understand culture change and systemic thinking. So we are engaging those, yeah. But somehow I got a mental model of getting one of the consultants to come in and do a exercise, you know, and because it's just what I meant. So there are some, and I think Liz, you spoke beautifully to it. So there are three discrete pieces. One piece is about governance arrangements. So those are more concrete, but even then we have a fairly collaborative culture, which sure it takes time to bring people along, and we are making good progress on that. And then the other thing is the cultural transformation of IFoA as an institution led by our CEO, Stephen Mann, and that is making good progress, yeah, good progress. But then the cultural transformation of profession is a 3 to 10 year game, and it is not something which you could say that, but of course, positioning, branding, causes, awareness are helpful. But here I go back to the quotation which Thomas Chalmers mentioned about what Gandhi said. Actually, the change has to come from people at the top, at the council, at my level, because we have to be the change we want to see in the world. So how we make decisions, we say that we want to create room for courage and imagination, but our decision must reflect that and not just being accurate and consistent and cautious. So that is a difficult thing for us to do. But even then, I think as a council and as a group, we have made good progress in my view, because we are more trusting as a group about our public interest positions, to be a bit more bolder, a bit more louder, and engaging people outside our institute and faculty. So and of course, this is not a question of 6 months. It's something that has been repeated over time. So the cohesiveness of the strategy and the commitment of the presidential team and successive presidential team is necessary. Yeah.
Thanks, Suee. And Liz, coming back to yourself, I mean, you must have come up against some serious challenges at EY. I mean, listening to Suee here, can you speak to how you overcame some of those challenges and some advice that you might impart, you know, hearing what Suee is saying?
Yeah, so I think it's really difficult, and Richard has talked to this already. It's really difficult in a successful environment to persuade people to change, because why would you? Look, we're really successful. So apart from finding these pain points around the organization, which was quite deliberate, the other thing that we did was really go after the data, which I suspect might appeal to the actuarial audience. We had a lot of, if I can describe them as urban myths in the business. Oh, well, the reason that we don't have more senior women across the business is because they all leave in their 30s to go and have babies. Well, let's look at the data. And we looked at the data, and that wasn't what was occurring at all. What was occurring was that our returning mums who were coming back into the business had become all of a sudden invisible in the business, regardless of their career trajectory before they left to go on maternity leave. So we one by one, we looked at each of these urban myths. We looked at them because they were often used as excuses for failure or apparent failure, and then use the data to debunk those myths, because the data just was irrefutable, and it was our data. Because I rather naively thought that some of the really excellent work that is out there and available from Morgan Stanley and Credit Suisse and McKinsey and yada yada, that would be helpful. And and to a point it is in terms of setting the scene, but it wasn't until we got to our numbers and which enabled us to hold the mirror up to us, that we could really start to understand what was going on in our business and then make change.
Oh, that's great, Liz. Well said. And Richard, if I could come back to yourself on the another plug here, really, for Pinsent Masons, because on that homepage, you know, there's a video of yourself there speaking about respect and openness. One of your German colleagues talks about treating people exactly right. And that reminded me actually of a quote from Simon Sinek, who said, "Customers will never love a company until the employees love it first." So you're creating this company that, you know, will be loved essentially by your people. But what happens to those who don't get it? How do you address those who are, you know, not quite seeing the light, as it were? And I'm sure Suee, Chieh will be up against this. Liz has already experienced it. How do you overcome that challenge?
Well, I think the truthful, honest answer is you don't ever really overcome that challenge. I think one of the things that all businesses face is it's very easy to spend 90% of your time on 10% of the people. And that's frequently a mistake. You know, if you look at change programs or you look at, you know, the sort of topics that we are talking about in any organization, you've got 10-15% who are with you right from the outset, and almost whatever you say, they're just massively enthusiastic about everything, and they're fine. You've probably got 10 or 15%, it doesn't matter what you're trying to do, are never with you. And my suggestion would be is don't get distracted by either of those two. You know, don't kid yourself by hanging around with the 10% of enthusiasts, everything's good, and don't depress yourself by spending all your time with the 10-15% naysayers. Yeah. The change to your business is to be found in that 80% in the middle. You move that 80% just 1 or 2 percentage points in the right direction, and you'll transform your organization. And ultimately, what happens over a period of time is the kind of 10 or 15% who kind of don't get it, whatever it is, will just eventually work out that this isn't the organization for them. That doesn't make them bad people, and they will move to organizations, you know, that believe more in the sorts of things that they do. So, you know, I think many of us have, and I've certainly fallen foul of this. You know, you take it as a personal challenge that you're going to convert that one over there. And it's a bit like there's a great expression about never trying to teach a pig to sing. It wastes your time and it annoys the pig. And you're kind of in that sort of space. Don't worry so much about that then. Focus on that, you know, the silent majority, if you like. Because if you can push them gently in the right direction, that's where the fundamental change will come.
Great, Richard, thanks. And Russell, I think we have a poll just to ask our attendees, you know, if they're, you know, if you're currently working in a culture that's aligned with your own values. Russell, do you have that poll to hand? Thanks.
Yeah, the poll's just launching. So the question is, to what extent are you working in a culture that's aligned with your values, which I think is very much reflecting what Richard was saying. Okay, a good number, we've got over 120 folk have voted already. I'll just close it very shortly because the figures are remaining pretty static now. So I'm just sharing the results, Thomas, and as you can see, that's, you know, pretty positive news, I guess.
It is, yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thanks, Russell. Liz, coming back to yourself, in the current climate, I mean, how challenging or easy is it to nurture or create a culture in a virtual environment, do you think?
It certainly has its challenges compared to being able to work face to face, because you lose so much of the nuance. So I think, you know, in the last 9 months or so have taught me that I need to be even more crisp with my communication and my messages, so that there's less sort of ambiguity, if you will. And I think, you know, I've really had to dig deep for resilience and patience, recognizing that this is much more a world of, you know, that old adage about teaching, you know, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. Rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. So I think I've found that personally quite challenging. And if you think about, you know, the types of engagement that we're having, they're very set piece engagement. You know, it's this sort of Zoom or Teams call, etc. And there isn't always the opportunity after that call for somebody who's gone away and suddenly thought, oh, actually, I need to clarify ... And because it isn't a water cooler moment, it sort of gets lost. And so there is I think, you know, much more control and patience required.
Thank you. Thanks, Liz. That's a great point, and a good point about the water cooler moment too. Russell, just wondering, do we have any questions or a question that's risen to the surface there that you think would be appropriate for the...
Yeah, I guess a question that any or all of the panel could think about is, how do we create a sense of urgency for successful change? Do we need a sense of urgency? It's been advocated by Cotter, but one of the delegates has raised that. Do we need to create a sense of urgency for successful change?
Thanks, Russell. I think this would be a good one, certainly for you, Suee, but can I just preempt it by saying that, you know, you have, you stepped away from executive roles in March 2017, but your final executive role was Group CEO of NTUC Enterprise Cooperative, 16,000 employees, turnover of 5.1 billion. Prior to that, you were awarded Outstanding CEO of the Year 2012 in the Singapore Business Awards for leading a cultural revolution. It seems to me that you're a good person to answer this question that Russell's just posed.
Cotter is right. A sense of urgency is required, otherwise you lose momentum.
Sure.
But that urgency has to be expressed in different ways, given different types of organizations. If it's a commercial organization, or it was a cooperative, or it is a members body, yeah. And it is not just with respect to linear time. I have a notion about strategic time, because in a sense that sometimes it appears that nothing is moving, but people are moving in their minds, yeah. And when things are suddenly click, it will move very quickly. And getting people on the same page and aligned and committed is important. So I don't think there are going to be hard and fast rules, yeah, about speed. But I think that the senior leadership needs to be aware. If the momentum is lost, it's very hard to get back again, yeah. But at the same time, you need to bring people along, especially in a time like this where people are not meeting in person, and keeping the organization afloat is a challenge in itself, yeah. So having said that, I think there's something about understanding the context, yeah. Because someone asked a question and I answered him privately. He said a diversified portfolio is good, but what if you are a stock in the portfolio? So he went into a philosophical issue of systems thinking, right? How could you reinvent yourself if you are part of the system, yeah? You are part of the system, yeah? You can't, because you're contained. So our solutions cannot be found at the same level at which the problems are created. It has to be a level up at least, yeah. So got to be able to stand above, right? So very often CEOs are from outside, very often, or the new board is from outside because the company is in trouble. Very often the system changes on its own, right? And we have some elements of that because I'm in a way I'm from outside and Stephen is from outside and Graham is and there is an ingredient, but we are still within the system. And then we go into a very philosophical discussion, right? Because it is about second order intervention, right? I have a metaphor. I have a metaphor that IFoA is like it's like a watch, a Seiko watch or a Piaget watch, or like our body, right? We could replace every part of the watch over 1 year, but it's still the same watch. Ourselves replaces ourselves over the 7 years, but we are the same person. Yeah, unless you do an active intervention on the way you organize yourself. Yeah, because we could change everyone in IFoA and recruit according to how we recruit. You will still be the same IFoA, even everybody is changed. So you got to be able to do a compelling proposition about what the new IFoA is and what are the qualities you want and how you are prepared to support it and reward it, and how are you going to discourage behaviors which are dissonant with it. That is an active intervention. So we want to go away, not completely, from a mindset of consensus and permission seeking and process driven to one which is more outcome, more passionate, more decisive, more commercially savvy. Yeah? Those are powerful words, right? But that's not necessarily us. But by declaring that, we are making a statement. Then there's a question of actual leadership, of holding that. Yeah, and actual leadership and holding that is not a question of textbook. It's a day-to-day behavior and what we pay attention to. We can say a lot of things. I can give long speeches on culture, right? But people are going to judge me and the senior leadership team on how we make our decisions and what we pay attention to.
You are though a great role model for it, Suee, and I know that you've alluded to growth mindset. I know that you actually were in Dr. Carol Dweck's class in Stanford. She conceptualized the idea of growth mindset. What you were saying there sort of reminds me of Einstein's quote. I think that the thinking that brought you to where you are today might not be the thinking that's going to take you to where you want to be tomorrow. If I could just quickly, I've got an eye on the clock here, it's 9:28. Some two quick fire questions, one to Richard, one to Liz. Richard, Peter Drucker said culture eats strategy for breakfast in 20 seconds. Is that right?
I think it probably was right. I think I would suggest that life's moved on a little bit, because if your culture doesn't sit at the heart of your strategy, you're going to struggle. So I think if you're having this battle between this thing you called your culture, this thing you called your strategy, you're starting in the wrong place. Put the ingredients of your culture at the heart of your strategy, and then you don't have to worry about whether Mr. Drucker is right or wrong. Thanks, Richard. Thank you. And Liz, coming back to that David Beckham analogy, a football question for you to finish on. Diego Maradona died, obviously, sadly, last month. One of the commentators in the news said that he had defined the culture of Argentina. Do you think it's possible for one person to define the culture of a nation?
Well, interestingly, I just share an anecdote. I went to Buenos Aires about 15 years ago on holiday, and I was in a taxi going from the airport to the hotel, and the driver said, "Oh, where are you from?" And I was like a little bit reluctant to say, "Oh, I'm from Britain," given the Falkland, Las Malvinas, etc. But I said, "Oh, we're from London." "Oh, British. Right. What do you think about the incident?" And I thought, "Oh God, here we go. We've got to go talk about the war now." And before I could answer, he went, "Hand of God." So he was talking about the World Cup Hand of God incident. Thank goodness, not the Las Malvinas. So I think he did change.
Change the culture of a country.
Yeah.
Thanks, Liz. Thank you. And thanks, Suee, so much for your insights. Richard, for your insights too. You really are role models in culture change. Russell, if I could pass back to yourself to close out the session. Thank you. Oh,
just mindful of the time, we better wrap up now. So I'd just like to thank you all for attending today, and sorry we didn't get around to answering all the questions that you've posed, but we may have answered some of them as we went along. Thank you again to the panelists for such a great conversation, and no doubt it will continue. So I'd just like to learn from Richard, but also one of the questions in the polls was, how important is it to have a memorable set of values? And, 3 words were great to hear that you're using, Richard. So I thought, on behalf of Thomas and myself, we'd just like to wish everybody a very healthy, restful and peaceful festive break. Thank you all for joining us, and we will be back in touch with webinar details for March next year. Thank you.
thank you.
Bye-bye.